Well, everybody, I have been looking forward to this episode for several weeks, actually, maybe a couple months, y'all. I don't even remember now. And back last spring, when I was talking with Amelia and Carla at Rooted Farmers, I was like, I really want to talk to some collectives, some co-ops, trying to learn more. This is such a popular model, and I was super excited to have her introduce me to Justine McFarland and Jill Shea. Welcome, y'all, to the Flower Podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have really been looking forward to this for a lot of reasons. One of which I feel like for a lot of the smaller farmers, this is an avenue that really gives them market share. It helps give them access. It helps them be part of a team of other farmers, really. And so I really kind of like to hear. I know the neat thing about having both of you on is you both don't have the same model. So,
Yeah.
and I'd love to hear. I don't know who wants to go first, but why, Jill? Why don't you go first? And let's hear kind of more about your collective and maybe a short version of how you ended up in the world of flowers.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Jill Shea. I am the manager of the Connecticut Flower Collective. Our collective's been around for 4 years now. I've been a part of it for three. And we have over 200 members now. We have 28 growers, so the rest of those are buyer members. And we have mostly grower members in Connecticut and buyer members in Connecticut, but we have a few outliers in Massachusetts and New York because they don't have collectives there. So they come and sell or buy their product from us. And I've been a farmer for over 15 years in various avenues, but have only been a flower farmer for the past three. And I just wish I had discovered flowers sooner. I've been farming, in the trenches for so long, and then I found flowers and found both the creative side and the gritty side that I love out of both of those worlds. So I've fallen madly in love with it, and being a part of the collective just sort of combined my experience and sort of education and administrative stuff with farming. So it's been a match made in heaven. Super
That's
happy.
awesome. So
Yeah.
in farming, were you growing flowers or vegetables or a little bit of everything?
In the past, I had grown vegetables. All I basically used farming as a way to travel. So I farmed,
Oh,
spicy peppers in New Mexico and worked with dairy cows in Vermont, and so a little bit of everything, just sort of as a way to educate myself on farming. So kind of landed in Connecticut sort of by accident, but yeah, that's become my home, and flowers have become my choice farming method now.
I
So
love that. That's great.
yeah.
So I know I want to go a little deeper into the collective in a second, but let's hear Justine's story.
Yeah, so I'm Justine. I'm market manager and secretary and a grower owner of River City Flower Exchange Cooperative. We are cooperatively owned, so I am one of those. We have 12 farms this year, and nine of us are owners. Um, and we've got some trial growers this year too. We're in Richmond, Virginia, and so we kind of service an area with like a 30 to 40 mile radius around Richmond. And we've been around since 2019, but in 2021 we became cooperatively owned. So prior to that, it was two founders. And I have a similar farming story to Jill. I've been doing it for 9 years. I learned how to do it in Vermont. And I started with like a combination of ornamental flowers and greenhouse production, and then vegetables, and decided I loved flowers. And once I really got into flowers, I realized how much I miss vegetables and fruit. So I'm actually bringing that back to my farm, just for a little change of pace. And yeah.
It's funny, I did that too. When I grew flowers for a little while, I ended up bringing back some vegetables. I don't know, it's just hard to separate it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Well, So gosh, two different, two totally different areas. You guys have roughly been, I guess, almost the same length of time. I think that's incredible. I I guess I really there's so many different ways to organize um, these structures that bring farmers together. And I'd love to hear more about that because sometimes we get a lot of questions about this actually, where people want to learn more about it and trying to understand how to do it. What's the best way? Yes, and so I know sometimes it's different from one state to the next too, but I'm curious if you don't mind sharing. So I know, Jill, for example, we were talking before, and I don't know. Do you mind going into exactly kind of how the structure of your collective is? Because that's another thing. I always do this. Sorry, everybody. But the difference in a collective and a cooperative. I mean, let's start
Mm.
there. What's the difference?
Sure. Yeah, so our collective is actually a single member LLC right now. Originally, it was run under a different umbrella, but right now it's a single member LLC. So that's very different than a cooperative model, which typically has multiple owners and has a board that reviews decision making. Um, so we can get into the nitty gritty of like why we chose that if you'd like. I don't know if you want to speak more to your
Sure.
model, Justine.
Yeah, yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for us, yeah. Go ahead, Justine.
Yeah, go ahead, Justine. Sorry. I successfully answered two things at the same time, causing confusion, which we'll edit out. And that's the great thing about this. All right.
Perfect.
So, Justine, let's hear about your structure a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in a cooperative model, and we're like pretty new to this, it's pretty new to the state of Virginia. We, like Jill mentioned, we are all equal owners, and we have an executive board that does like decision making, and then within that board, we can dictate committees among the other owners that are not on the board. And we've got outside board members too. We felt that was important. So we have Rhea of Photosynthesis Florist. She sits on our board.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it's just, we're still a group. We're like a full on team. It's just we have a lot more voices in terms of making a decision versus a single owner.
Do you have to have a lot of, like, how often do you guys meet?
Quarterly. The
Oh, okay.
board quarterly, and then we try to meet twice a year as the whole owner group, and kind of like once in July and then once again in December. So we'll hit like the quiet lull between spring and fall, and then we'll hit the winter and kind of do a review.
Okay. That's not as, I've heard of some that or meet a whole lot more than that. So I'm sure your grower members are quite happy about that. So yeah, that's awesome. And Jill, so how does it work with that? Because it's kind of interesting having a single owner, but then have 28 growers like kind of all come under one roof. That must be
Right.
an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, so I think part of it, to be honest, is that we've gotten really lucky with our group. We just have really wonderful people who are engaged and involved. And when I first started, it was sort of a discussion point every year where we'd say, is everyone still happy with how this is being run, how things are operating? How do you feel about this single member LLC? So we made that a vote out to our whole grower membership and made sure that everyone was happy with that and everyone was just like, I'm really glad that I don't have to do it. So it was really just a matter of time and commitment and ended up being something that alleviated the burden from a lot of growers. In our case, it was sort of like if you guys are able to take control and hire a staff versus the growers being responsible for what needs to happen in the day to day, that was more ideal for our group. And that said, everything that we do is still always up for a vote. It's up for review every year. How is this system working? How is that system working? And it just has maintained this open dialogue since we've been around. And that just seems to function really well. Everyone's voice gets heard, and that goes for the full membership. That goes to buyers. We have a a feedback box that's there digitally the entire year that people can submit anonymously if they want to. So we're constantly taking feedback and adjusting our systems based on that. So it's very membership focused, even though it's sort of like the decision making comes up to management. It's something that we have everybody in mind the entire time. So yeah.
So this might be, I mean, because of that and that decision making process. This might be a silly question, but that never stopped me though. So I'm wondering, what makes you different than a wholesale house?
Justine, you want to go first?
Well, no, because Justine's different because Justine's part of that, has a collective situation. I mean, a cooperative. But as
Mm,
being a single owner,
yeah.
because since I work for a wholesale house, I'm that person that's organizing local growers the best I can. But
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing is so focused, hyper focused on that. I'm just curious, what do you feel like? I mean, is there really a difference, or is it like I don't know. I don't know if I asked my question correctly.
Yeah, I would say for us here, at least, like the conventional wholesaler experience is just entirely different in terms of just like a buyer interface and relationships.
Hmm.
It's much more like we kind of mentioned in the beginning, a community of people who are coming together for sort of a shared purpose, and that shared purpose is like quality locally grown flowers, and dependability, accountability is really huge. And I'm sure we'll get into this later, but one of the reasons that we really grew this year was because a lot of conventional wholesalers weren't able to fulfill product with a lot of things happening on an international level right now. So people were turning to local, in desperation. I need this, and then realizing the local difference. And part of that is relationships with our customers. It's much more of a, I know everyone's buying habits, but I also know like their children's names. And, it's a different kind of shopping experience. And the connection between the growers and the buyers is much more intimate. Um, and it's just a lot more personalized. We really emphasize customer service on our end. Not that wholesalers don't have that, but I find that it's a just much more personal connection. Just a different kind of feel when you walk in. That said, we do provide a wholesale product. I think we provide really competitive pricing, and we're always sort of aware of the wholesale market trend when it comes to what people are interested in having, pricing, availability, systems, all of that. Um, but I like to think that we're slightly more comprehensive, if I may say so.
Sure. No,
Um,
that's fine.
but yeah, so
Cool.
I hope that answers your question. But
Yeah, I think that there is definitely a connection that happens when you're the growers talking to your end customers directly. I mean, I think there's a dynamic, and even though you might represent 28 growers in your collective, there's still it feels more family. It feels more tight knit, I'm sure,
mm-hmm.
than having that extra layer in there, which is yeah, I'm glad to hear that actually. So, Justine, I'm curious, as far as a cooperative goes, that has members, you have meetings and boards, but as far as how you incorporate the growers and the farmers into everything you do, you mind going into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazingly like just about the same process that Jill has described for hers, with the final decision making like on all of us to steer the ship. And so our votes actually like have to be recorded and written down, and they make a difference. But we have like the same feedback loop, the same exact open communication. That is so key when you're working with a team, is to maintain that open communication and transparency. And I feel like that's important with buyers too. And she really hit the nail on the head where it's a personal experience, and we really like take time and work with our buyers and explain how seasonality actually works. And that's another difference from wholesale, is they can get what they want just about any time of the year. And that's not the case when you're growing local and in a local region. So really taking the time and talking to them about the types of flowers we have kind of builds their trust, but also it just feels like they become family members. And so we're really working towards the same goal. Like, we want them to have beautiful flowers for their events. We want to grow beautiful flowers. And so recognizing that we're on the same path is key. But yeah, but the back end side of us is just like Jill. I mean, communication is like the top thing.
So as a collective or cooperative, do you present your inventory as one like unified inventory, or is it broken down by farms?
It's by farm, and that's something that, well, we use a sales platform called Rooted Farmers, and that is
Mm-hmm.
something that they maintain, is farm level transparency. And so the buyers at all times know exactly where the farm is, what products they're getting from which farm, and if I have to ever change it on my end, and that's the other great thing about being a team, is if something happens, we can pull from other farms and get the same exact thing, and the quality is going to be there. The buyer is privy to all those changes the entire way, and so we're never surprising them, and that's super important too.
I understand. Um, as far as that goes for you, Jill, is it the same situation, or is it? I'm just trying to understand. We get these questions a lot here at the podcast, that where people are like, "Well, what's this difference in this and that?" And so, and I think sometimes this is a crazy thought. It has everything to do with the group, right? The members, like how what is their a little bird told me, Jill, that you're really big on the process and perfecting processes to streamline things. And and it's like, what is the focus, like in y'all's case where you're the managers of these situations? um do you guys use Rooted the same way? I guess you use Rooted, I'm assuming that.
Yeah, so we use Rooted and we're in love with Rooted. It's made our lives so much easier. I mentioned I wasn't there in the first year, but that was, overcoming tangles of spreadsheets and trying to, keep track of this and that. Rooted allows us to stay extremely organized, and it's so sophisticated and so tailored to the industry that I genuinely think we couldn't do what we do without them. It just makes everything really organized. But yes, on the buyer end, it allows them to see all of the things that Justine mentioned. Who the product is coming from, the length of the stem, the price per stem, and from a buyer perspective, while they might know that they love the amaranth from Anderson Acres, they also know that if they can't get it that day, we're going to make sure that another farm has it covered. So that's what's great, is when they're viewing availability, they might see their favorite farm to get a certain product from, but there's 4 other farms that are most likely listing the same thing, where we always know we can cover our bases. I would say the majority of the time we're able to cover something. Certain buyers shop by color or by flower type, but others might really love the way that someone grows flamingo feather celosia. So it kind of depends on the buyer, but I feel like we're able to support whatever they need thanks to Rooted.
But you just brought up a great point that I've often been concerned about, because I've also heard this on many levels. Um, how do you approach the idea when you've got 28 growers, or in your case, Justine, nine, doesn't matter how many, but they all want to grow sunflowers, or they all want to grow the same sunflowers or the same zinnias or the same, when you have that dynamic, do you guys talk about that? I'm curious how you both handle that.
Yeah, so on our end, that's like part of building a team and maintaining a team is, at the end of the day, we're a business and we've got to make business decisions. And so if all of us are growing sunflowers, we're going to flood our market. And so we're working behind the scenes, crop planning amongst ourselves and trying to work collaboratively in that way, that we all have access to this amount of space, but we can only sell this amount of sunflowers. And so why don't we take and find something else that we could not keep on the floor for the year and grow more of that and push that flower. And so we're constantly looking at analytics. That's another great thing that Rooted gives us, is very granular analytics about flower types and sales and percentage of sales. And so we can sit down as a group in the winter, or when we're going to order seeds, or after ranunculus season when we have to order corms, and say, hey, this color was great, this color was not so great, so maybe let's cut back on that a little bit, and if you can, let's go in this direction, and really like making an effort to make business decisions at the end of the day.
So in that case, Jill, before I'm going to jump in that case, so does like everybody just grow a little bit of sunflowers, or does like a few people grow a lot, and then those other people maybe do better at celosia, so they're doing celosia, or you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you spread the wealth with that?
Yeah, so the cool thing about us is Richmond is kind of central to Virginia, but we've got farms, like I am a good hour east of Richmond, and our furthest away farms are an hour and a half west of Richmond. And so they're in the mountains, they're in the Appalachian Mountains, and their climate is totally different than my climate. I'm on the coast. And so we're able to grow all the same things, but hers are going to be 2 weeks later than mine, and mine's going to be 2 weeks ahead of Richmond. And so we extend our season just by strategically knowing where our farms are located and what zones they're in that they can grow in. And then not all farms have a passion for sunflowers, and that's totally cool, and they're going to, crush it with something else. Or it's just, I think it's power in numbers. If we're all growing a little bit of everything, with some exception, it's more the merrier. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, being able to manage microclimates and those nuances, I mean, just strengthens your cooperative, I think, for sure. So, Jill, how do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, so I'm actually really happy to answer this question because it's sort of our approach to this has somewhat shifted this year. So, and I'm hoping that this will be helpful to new collectives, which last year we were just open 1 day a week. And the way that functioned, we still had a pre-order system, and then we had a market day in the middle of the week. And somehow magically, looking back, I have no idea how we did this, but we received product an hour before market, arranged it into pre-order shelving, and buyers came to pick up. And during that time, growers would sort of spend time together, and this was a time where they would talk crops, they would talk crep, they would talk all the details of growing that week. But they would also take their product with them at the end of the day, or at the end of market, because they might have other sales channels, and they sort of anticipated what they were selling for pre-order, what items they would have available to floor, and then they would distribute that out to other people. So it was during that time where there were some weeks where we would have a lot of market extras at the end of the day, and other times where we would be totally cleared out. And we didn't really have a system around evaluating that. It was sort of like everybody was sort of on their own. And this year we're now open Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and we receive on Tuesdays. So we have a whole day to organize orders, which we certainly need a 7-hour day to do that, what we used to do in an hour. So if that gives you any sense of our growth this year. And growers, instead of hanging out during market, leave their products with us through Thursday and Friday. And everybody has a little bit of a different system. Some people pick up at the end of Friday still and use their extras for other markets. Some of them just say you can donate our product. We have a great organization we donate our extras to. Or we might just compost it. And this year we're also able to dry product. So we do as much as we can to extend that sales window as possible. Um, but this is a year where we've really been able to take a closer look at who has too much, what do we have too much of, and that's something we'll be redirecting our attention to at our year-end meeting to sort of discuss, okay, what did well, what didn't. Like Justine mentioned, we'll be able to really look at the analytics and decide what makes the most sense. And every grower does have a specialty. Everyone has a thing that's definitely their thing. But we have a lot of supporting actors who, do it just as well. But, it's maybe not their specialty and they grow less of it. So, yeah,
Sure.
that's how
Well,
the
okay,
questions
you
work.
guys are great because you just like lead perfectly into a next question. So you went from being open 1 day to three.
Mm-hmm.
So Justine, how many days a week are you open?
Yeah, so we did the same thing. We were the first 3 years we were just Wednesdays, and this year we're Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday.
Okay, because see that led because while you guys before you got into that, I was thinking, just from some of the photographs you guys have shared with me, I thought, well, do these farmers only bring their orders, or how much extra do they bring? And then, do any of your members also use outside channels like farmers markets or maybe in their area direct? I mean, I'm just curious. Do they have to be exclusive with you, or do they have alternate channels? Do you know?
Yeah, our farms, I think almost all have other channels, and that's usually a farmer's market. A lot of them are diverse farms, so they're doing vegetables
Hmm.
or value add like herbal products in addition to flowers. And so we'll carry some of those value add products. This is the first year we have like a proper store. Um, so we do retail, we've got some local products from local makers. But yeah, we're primarily wholesale for sure. We take care of our wholesale folks, and so our farms are channeling most of their wholesale stuff through us. And we're it's always a game of how much do you send to the floor, but
Right.
I think we've nailed it. And yeah, and they'll bring us extra product through the week. Like this past week has been wild. We've sold out Wednesday and today. So they're going to bring us fresh product on a Saturday, and that's also awesome that they're close enough to do that. But yeah, no, we're all diverse farms. We all do kinds of cool things.
Well, and I think too, once you start getting a regular clientele, and surely after 3 to 4 years, then you're there. People know it's like it's first come, first serve. I've got to get there. If I need extra, of course, it's nice to know you have your order, your base order there ready for you, waiting. But But I think too, the farmers count on those uh, um, those customers with great local flower tastes to come in and want like totally look for the candy store and find things they hadn't planned on, right?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so Jill, how does that work with you guys? Is there a certain percentage? Because you even mentioned a second ago drying extra flowers. So is that something the collective does, or the individual? The product goes back to the farms they came from to be dried.
Yeah, so some of our growers will dry things on their own and then just bring in dried product to us. But if at the end of the week we're saving something, we do the drying on site. We have kind of a room in the back that's the perfect drying area, and we just sort of evaluate every week. We have our categories of is this compost, donate, or dry, and it just kind of depends on the quality of the product at that point. It's is it suitable for drying? Is this better, like a dahlia, or for example, would be donated versus dried. So we're just sort of evaluating at the end of the week what makes the most sense. But yeah, very similar to what Justine said. It's sort of on the farmer to decide what they'd like to list for pre-order, and then what they'd like to provide for the floor. So the beauty of that is if they want to put something on pre-order, they can list pretty conservatively, and this is especially helpful for new farmers who are sort of getting their feet wet of like, okay, when will this flower mature? When is it actually going to be perfect for picking? I'm going to list 2 bunches even though I probably have 5, they, pre-order sale those 2 bunches, and then the other 3 can go to the floor if they end up reaching the right stage. And that gives them the flexibility to still sell those 5 bunches, but to be sure about the 2, and that accountability piece is there as a result. Um, so yeah.
Hmm. It's my brain's just spinning a little bit here because I'm thinking if and I don't want to get too nitty gritty here on this, but if either so I get if a farmer brings stuff that doesn't sell, then obviously they don't get credit for those sales that didn't happen. You might choose to compost something, or the farmer will say, "Go ahead and compost it," and then that's done. And then they don't in either of your situations do they come back and pick those flowers up ever? Maybe you just said that and I'm just repeating something.
Yeah, in our case, they everybody kind of has a different preference, so I just have it up here what everybody likes to do.
Okay.
So we do have some growers who just have more sales outlets, and I'll say, hey, you have a lot of stuff still here this week. Do you want to come pick up? And they'll give me a yes or a no. There's some people who just want to see their product at the end of the week, and they come and pick up and want to compost or dry it themselves. And then we have some people who are just like, I live far enough away, please just donate this for me. And yeah, so it kind of depends on the farmer preference in that case. But yeah.
Makes sense. Is it the same with you, Justine?
Yeah, it's pretty much the exact same. We have some regular farms that are always going to pick up. We've got regular farms that are always going to donate. And then we've also been experimenting with drying some extra stuff because there's always that random week where you have like 14 bunches of marigolds left over. Like it
Right.
just wasn't a marigold week, but they dry so beautifully.
Right.
And so we've been doing that too. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing we've done this year for record keeping as well is if someone is interested in having something donated, but they want to know what they had left over at the end of the week, we've created a shrink log. So they still have a way to cross reference their own record keeping to say, oh, okay, this didn't sell, this is where it went. And we essentially at the end of the week catalog everything that we've donated or composted. Um, Everything that's dried stays in inventory because it has another opportunity to sell. But otherwise, that's how we function for the growers to let them know what sold or what didn't that week
Well, and
on the
that
floor.
lends sure, and that lends me to this question. When you have, two or three farmers, um, obviously it's probably really easy to know whose is whose and what and all this. And obviously when there's pre-orders like through Rooted, then that's easy to keep separate and everyone knows. But once it hits the floor, how do you guys keep up with whose product belongs to who for crediting
Yes.
them?
So we are color coded. Every single farm has a different color rubber band or twist tie, like a bread tie, and that's how we know. That's how farms identify themselves. We don't actually wrap anything when it comes to our market, but we try to save paper. But we do wrap at market. So we have loose bunches. We make a pretty display, but yeah, everyone's color coded, and that's how we log it into, to point of sale and make sure our farms are paid appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a similar system. We do still use paper sleeves that have a label on it, but we make those optional for the farmers, specifically for the market floor. There's some flowers that might just, hold up better or look better in a sleeve. Um, we do require sleeves for all pre-ordered items because that's how we provide a label. It's pretty much the farmer's logo, the customer name. Sometimes if it's dahlias, we'll list the variety on there. So that's on them to sort of keep track and label correctly. And then any floor items, they have the option to do their colored twist tie. We do a color code system as well, or put their logo on a stamp and on a sleeve.
Okay. Okay. So, that's pretty interesting. Do I have two questions I really want to ask. So we're going to start with this one. I've in speaking with different collectives, cooperatives, over the past couple years, a lot of them, start off have kind of a rough start. I don't mean rough in a negative way, but I mean it's just hard. I mean there's a lot of things things that you guys know. You have to get those kinks worked out and some of the details worked out and stuff. I guess where I'm trying to go with this is, um, and I hope you're okay me asking this question, but at this point, are you guys both profitable? Like, are you covering your overhead of your spaces that you're having to use for this meeting area?
Yeah. Justine, should we say in unison, yes?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't be here at this point if we weren't like truly. And we have 4 employees, myself included, um, and rent and all the things, and yeah, we're killing it. But it's because at the end of the day, we're treating it like a business, and we're really looking at strategy and like Jill said, like streamlining processes and constantly like reevaluating to make sure that we're actually on track with our goals.
Yeah. Yeah, same for us. I mean, it's just a matter of evaluating our costs, which for us are pretty straightforward overhead costs. We have rent and we have employees that we have to pay, and we have 3 delivery drivers. Um, I think there's 4 of us now doing administrative back end stuff, and that's everything from receiving to checking out. Everything in between. We do it all. Um, and yeah, we've been profitable since I've been involved, and it's really just a matter of, in our case, having really committed people who are invested in the collective being successful. So I don't think that it's easy, but I think with the right group of people and people who are truly committed to supporting local flowers, it's definitely possible. And um, yeah, just with some careful planning and strategic pricing and just mindful decision making, I think it's easy to be profitable if you want it to be.
Well, that's a nice thought. I would agree. I think too though sometimes it's so funny. Being on my end of the flower chain, I work with a lot of designers and some of them have struggled over the years and finally get it figured out. Okay, it's important to charge what you're worth and get that value. And I think sometimes it happens too on the farmer end of the scale, where they don't know, they don't feel confident to charge what it's worth. But then I think too, when you're taking on the additional overhead, that's another dynamic. One of the conversations I had recently, it was with a collective that closed down this past, like this last year was their last year. That was one of the dynamics was the farmers got used to one level, and then then you know, there was some disagreement on raising the prices to cover overhead or to compensate people or to do whatever. And either that or taking a share out of the farmer side of it, which is the other, which is just as bad. And so it's kind of like negotiating that expectation. And then also, I think, understanding market price. What does a bunch of dahlias sell for? And is that 5 stems or 10? Or what does a dinner plate dahlia sell for? What, what I'm saying? It's like, and being fair and competitive. I mean, do you guys tune into where the market's at in your local area in determining your prices, or is it just strictly cost plus overhead, or how do you figure that out?
Yeah, I mean eh, it's a long process. I mean, we look at USDA Boston, we look at San Francisco, we even try to get some pricing out of like Miami. We look at local things in our area, and we just have really open conversations with our buyers. Like, hey,
Yeah.
we've got this. It's awesome, and it's also explaining why local prices are what they are, because they're paying for us. They're paying for the farms' lives. Like that is their livelihood. You've got small families, small farms. They're trying to make it work, and so we, as a co-op, we take 25% off the price, but we spend a really long time really talking to all of our members and saying, hey, if the price is this, we're going to take 25%. Is that still okay with you, what you're going to end up with? And if it's not, then we're going to work it out and we're going to figure it out. And we're going to market and fight for those prices because they are fair and they are market value. And what we do is important. And so that 25% also is paying for us as managers and staff to do all this logistic like burden for them. And so they're just bringing us flowers. We've handled the rest of it. And so they're not having to spend all those hours on their own trying to figure it out, running deliveries and all of, X, Y, and Z, when they hand me flowers and I take care of the rest, or me and my staff, we take care of the rest. And they get to go home and they get to spend more time in their fields and bring me more flowers, because at the end of the day, I'm trying to sell more flowers for sure.
Right. Yeah, it operates really similarly for us. In terms of pricing specifically, we have a similar model where growers get 80% of their sales, and we also charge a 5% handling fee to our buyers. But a note on profitability, when we hit our sales goal for the year, which means just to cover our staff's time for the year, to cover our rent for the year, we use the rest of that profit to either reimburse the grower or to so we distribute that evenly across our grower membership to make sure that they're getting as much back as they can, or we invest that money into infrastructure for the collective. And that's something that we vote on every year too, is like, how do you want us to distribute our leftovers this year? But as Justine mentioned, if it weren't for those choices on the 80% and the 5% handling fee, we as admin wouldn't be possible, and the collective as a whole would not exist. But it's kind of incredible that we're able to pull that off within that margin. And yeah, as for pricing, to get back to that, across the board, we're evaluating that, and that's something that we also allow people to send and submit to us. Oh, I'm seeing pricing here for this much, or seed for this crop this year costs this much. We need to reevaluate that. Should dried be more expensive than fresh for this crop for this reason? And that's something that we always discuss. We'll send updated price lists. And we actually have a uniform pricing system across our membership. So all of our growers charge pretty much the same thing for every product, but we allow them to organize their product into a short, standard, and premium pricing. So if for what, like a Lysianthus is a perfect example of a standard could have, 2 or 3 blooms, but a premium might have 5 or 6 on a single stem. And a short would maybe be, 8 inches tall and have 2 little blooms, but somebody still wants it. So we allow them to have a range of pricing that they're able to charge. And so far, that's been very fair across the board, and we haven't had much complaint on that. Some of our New York buyers even come in and are like, you guys aren't charging enough for that. So that's something that we're always evaluating and making sure is fair for everyone.
Sure. Well, I have to admit, I've never heard it split that way before, where it's the 20, but then it's a 5 for the buyers. And I have to confess, I love that idea, because then I mean, why are you laughing, Justine?
It's so smart. It's so smart. I'm listening. I'm scheming.
Well, the thing about it is you guys are providing a unique, valuable service.
Yeah.
Pulling together the experts in local flower growing under your roof, and that it's good that that's not solely the burden of the farms.
Yeah,
why shouldn't it also, right? Why shouldn't
Yeah.
it also be a part? I mean, yes, they're paying for the flowers and there's profit in that, but 5% doesn't seem greedy, and 5% seems like a very fair, just sort of reinvestment in your flower chain that's helping provide you the flowers you need for your business.
Right.
I just think it's brilliant. So
Yeah.
bravo. That's pretty cool. It's such an important part, and I feel like so many times, I'm excited to hear that you guys have grown to the point where that percentage is covering those expenses. You know, that that's working for you guys.
Yeah.
Because I've heard other numbers thrown out there sometimes, and the pushback, and I don't know if the pushback is just the lack of vision because, you know, not realizing the expense of the overhead, but also realizing that in investing in that central location, it's sort of like that rising tide raises all ships. And
Mhm.
I think it's such a powerful asset to develop if the farmers and growers that are part of your membership can really see it. So, and I say that not for y'all as much as for other people listening, because
Yeah.
I know you guys get it. Yeah. So, okay. So I've wanted to ask this question. If because you guys been doing this a few years now and it seems to be working, okay? So yes, that was a caveat. If you could go back in time and tell year
Mm.
one, Jill and Justine, a piece of advice,
Mm.
what would you tell them knowing what you know now?
Mm. Go ahead, Justine.
So funny. Um, I want to pass on a piece of advice that was passed on to me that I wish I would have known the first year. And it's made such an impact this year. And it actually comes from Amelia at Rooted Farmers, which is hilarious. But it was told to her. And it's basically like when you're juggling so many parts, like managing a collective and working with farms and also working with buyers and trying to market and all those things, they're all balls that you're juggling, right? And it's your job to figure out which ones are plastic, and if you accidentally drop it, it's going to bounce, and which one of those are glass, and you can't drop them because they're gone.
Mm.
And it's really sitting down and saying, okay, is this urgent, like the next 30 seconds urgent, or is this urgent as in like 2 weeks from now, it'll still be okay, and I can pick it back up when I have more brain space? Because when you're in the thick of it, they all feel like glass, and it's very easy to get underwater very quickly. Um, so that's something I wish I would have known the first year.
Snaps.
Yeah. Bravo.
So true.
Bravo. Yes. You get a gold star. Okay, Jill. How about you?
Yeah.
You're going back in time.
Mm, I think for me, it's as simple as just sort of trusting the process and kind of reminding yourself in those moments why you're doing this. You know, I feel like it can get really hectic, you know, Mother's Day, and I mean, then it just becomes every day. And, you know, actually, from Haley, who is the owner of our collective, her motto is, it's just flowers. You know, it's never it's going to be okay at the end of the day. You know, it might sound like a flower emergency, but it's just flowers, you know. Which for me sometimes I'm like, but it's all flower. Like flowers are everything in this instance. They're the most important thing. But I think going back to supporting local farms, making sure that local florists and designers feel supported and taken care of, and you know, to make them feel like they're also a part of this movement that it is really making a big difference in the world. Reminding yourself of that, reminding the buyers of that, reminding the farmers of that. Just kind of brings it all back together, and you're like, you know, this is just such important, valuable work, and to not lose
Yes.
sight of that. And that's what keeps me going, you know, during those crazy days, is just remembering like there's so much value in what we're doing. Um, so yeah, to not lose sight of that and to trust that it will all work out because it's just flowers, you know.
I love that because it's so easy when the frost comes, 2 weeks early, or the rain comes in and sits there for an extra week, or something.
Yeah,
It's challenging for sure.
yeah.
Justine, you mentioned rooted, and I want to kind of talk about this a little bit because I know that Amelia produced a course with Lisa Ziegler this year, one of the on-demand courses you can get for I don't know how much it is, $50 or something, just to kind of talk about collectives and how rooted can help that process. And the one thing I feel like I'm hearing that that and I don't mean to put words in anybody's mouth, so you can validate me or argue with me. I'm really okay with it. I'm curious. I kind of feel like Rooted ends up being like the extra employee you don't need because you've got this program that's facilitating so much. So, do you mind sharing kind of how you use it? And I mean, maybe you already have a little bit, but just kind of in more detail. Maybe going more. You can each approach it however you want, but I think I know especially that I'm aware of the new analytical features that came out this year. And I also know that they have spent a lot of time really trying to work with collectives to help facilitate that, more of them in our country. So, yeah, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, well, you kind of had two things in there, so we'll start with the course. Is definitely I would for sure recommend that if you're thinking about starting a collective because it's just going to give you a lot of context. It's going to lay out expectations because in the world of Instagram, you see all these beautiful things and you see stores filled with flowers, but you don't
Yes.
really see like what it actually looks like behind and that's really what that course is meant for is to kind of say, hey, here's all your options. Here's how it should work. Here's how to get from A to Z on the back end, and it's honest, and I think that's really great. And so for us using Rooted, the platform has been such a game changer. Truly, we use it for retail. It's point of sale. It works for invoicing for us doing advanced ordering with our buyers. Pre-ordering where buyers can go in on their own and create their own carts, and it all comes to one place, and then I can share that all of that data from ordering to analytics to minute details for each product with all of our farms with a buyer when it's appropriate, and just having all of that on one screen so I don't have to constantly be shifting gears is it saves us so much time, and it's like Jill said at the beginning, it keeps us organized for sure.
Yeah. For me, the course is really excellent because we actually have collectives that sometimes reach out to us or people who are interested in different areas and asking all the advice. And now I go check out this course because it's so comprehensive and it allows people to kind of get a sense of what really goes into this and from minute details to big picture planning. I found it really incredible and think it's a really invaluable resource. Um, and as for Rooted itself, in terms of, it's just sort of my daily life is on Rooted, and I'm really grateful to have something that's organized for me. But I would say one of the things that it's become super useful for on our end is receiving product from 28 farmers. You can imagine that process. They've allowed me to see every product that we get in and allowed me to see the order number, and I have a checkbox and I can keep all of that organized, go in and edit. It's the receiving process in particular for me is something that's extremely valuable, but we also use it as our point of sale system. So we're ringing up, each individual bunch that comes through the door, and it's just a very streamlined process thanks to their platform. And I'm always able to go back into orders and assess anything that comes up, refunds. It's all in one organized place for me, the farmer, and the buyer. So everyone kind of benefits from their thoughtfulness, which is amazing.
So that's interesting. I didn't know, and I should have, knowing Amelia, I should have known this. The point of sale. I mean, how convenient is that to have
Right.
everything on the one platform? So do you have to actually add inventory into the system, or do you just ring it up like a cash register and then they get the credit for it on the back end?
So for
Both.
us, like this is, oh, sorry, Justine.
No,
um,
I just was squeaking in that little word. Go ahead.
Yeah, for us, I feel like this is where the accountability piece is really great. And again, this is what allows us to assess, a really committed grower who's invested in selling their product through the collective is it's their responsibility to note what's in season for them then. Like I said, how many stems or how many bunches to upload that week. And they are also uploading a photo, a description, the botanical name, the price per stem, how many are in stock. So it's sort of their responsibility to maintain their listings. And then once things are brought for receiving, we can check those off and see them the way that they see them. But then we can also bring additional product by searching the farmer's inventory when we're bringing anything additional. So that's how the point of sale piece comes into play. Is we just our inventory is all of the farmers' combined inventories.
So then if I'm a florist and I'm coming in to pick up my order, you pull
Mm-hmm.
up my order by a number or a name and you
Yep.
see everything I'm supposed to get and the farmers it's coming from. So
Yep.
then you can just add to that order if I want additional product.
Yep.
And
Add to, edit,
okay.
change, remove, anything that needs to happen, it's all editable on my end.
Wow. And then they just
Yeah.
pay through the platform and everything.
Yep. They have their cards saved on the back end, and I don't
Wow.
need anything. I just hit process, and it's good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
So I'm curious from the analytics standpoint of Rooted. I feel like this year that whole side of Rooted has really elevated. And I'm kind of curious, is it too soon to know to really take advantage of those new features, or is it a trend you've been watching and seeing through that? Because I mean, I know it breaks down even like the color of zinnias or whatever. It depends on how much detail you put into it, I guess. But
On our end, the analytics are really great for the growers specifically. They're able to kind of take a look at everything you described, by color, by flower type, to see what sold best, what sold worst. And we're able to see that by buyer, and we're able to see it by grower, what sold for each. But I'll let Justine speak to that, her experience too.
Yeah, so a lot of that just lives in my head, in terms of like what is selling, what's in demand, and it comes from being the liaison between farmers and buyers, and knowing what's in season and knowing also what the buyers want. But to have the validation of seeing those numbers and seeing the little graph is awesome. It's just so exciting, and they've got like a little pie chart, and it's like, okay, well, who's the biggest slice this week, or who's the biggest slice this quarter? And it really helps us plan, but it also is indicative of trends, right? And so we can kind of see what is like a trend that's sticking around, and what is something that is super surprising that we're like, oh, well, maybe that'll happen again next year.
Mm-hmm.
that's a great point. I think too, and I don't know if you guys deal with this. I live in a right brain world, but I know there are people out there that are in a left brain world, and sometimes having a graph or having a chart to say, where it's like, see, you can see like what I'm saying here. Here it is in black and white or whatever
Mm-hmm.
colors of the rainbow it is. But my point is, it helps validate probably what you've already been saying or what you've been trying, especially. I mean, you're seeing things on the front line sometimes that they may not see, they may miss, and you're like, okay, we really need to be adding more of this into our
Definitely.
mix. And when and maybe that helps them see that. I don't know. I feel like it's definitely a bonus for that. So
Yeah. It's an extremely powerful crop planning tool too, for all of our growers. I know we did that at Eddie Farm this year. We looked back on analytics for the year, and there were surprises in there. We're like, wow, Snapdragons is up top. I can't believe it, but I guess we're growing more Snapdragons. So that I think it, like Justine mentioned, there's a lot of validation there. Where sometimes you have a perception of what your best crop is, or what does best because you like it, or
sure.
there might be some bias built in that you don't even realize. And the analytics kind of put you in your place and remind you, like, wait, perception isn't everything. So, yeah, they're very helpful in that way.
Interesting. Justine, have you had any surprises like snaps, like anything that you seeing a trend that you wish you had more of?
Yeah, we were also equally surprised by the snapdragons. And it's interesting because that seems like something that's really always readily available from a traditional wholesaler. So to have it be one of our top sellers was like, oh, okay, so we're nailing
We
it.
might have
But,
lost you, Justine.
oh, I'm sorry.
It's
Do I
okay. It's
have you
okay.
now?
For right this second, you do. So, you were saying snaps were surprising. Maybe say that again, and then maybe if you can try to think through what you said again. Sorry, snaps surprised you.
Yeah, yeah. So snaps have been super surprising for us this year, and what's been really surprising is that it's something that's readily available from a traditional wholesaler, and so to have us like nailing it is like, oh, okay, so we're actually like really making an impact in this like economy.
Yeah.
But Orlia has also been one of our top sellers, and that just blew my mind. Like I know it's a beautiful filler, it's white in the spring, everybody wants that, but uh, to me, it's kind of weedy. So I couldn't believe it. But yeah, Orlea this year.
Interesting. Interesting. So, okay, I gotta ask this question. I'm sorry. So, snapdragons. Do you feel like your growers are growing the traditional types, or are they growing different colors or different styles, and maybe that's what's drawing it? Or is it you're just growing? They just supporting. Maybe they're just supporting you because they want to support you. I mean, you. I'm
Hmm.
curious.
For us, we definitely recognized a little bit of a shift this year. Like when I very first started at the collective, I felt like we were able to kind of satisfy everyone's like fun stuff, or the cool and unusual. It was like, oh, we'll go to the collective for the lilies or, or the lotus pods is what I was thinking of. But now we're at this stage where we're able to provide still, yeah, a variety of colors and type, the butterfly snaps, all the special ones that are out there. I feel like we have every color and style you can imagine. But I feel like it's more of what Justine spoke to, which is we're able to not just be the cool and unusual now, we're able to provide the staples
Yeah.
and, the special sauce. And I think that's a really great shift for us is that we're able to provide really high quality even of the standard product, and people are turning to us for that instead of maybe a conventional wholesaler. Because even if it is the standard, it's still a really high quality of that standard product, and it was harvested yesterday.
Yeah. How do you
um,
beat that?
so right.
Is that the same for you, Justine? Is it you seeing that same trend with snaps?
Yeah, definitely with snapdragons. But just to reiterate what Jill says, it kind of is indicative that we're now the one-stop shop, and so they can get the things that aren't shippable, but they can also just save some time and get the rest of it through us too. And yeah, freshness has like made the difference. Um, but we've got all the colors of snaps, and blushes and whites and the softer tones tend to sell a little bit better with the wholesale folks, but the retail folks, they love those bright poppy colors, and so yeah, we move a lot.
Okay, so you just said that you said the R word, retail. So are I know that traditionally sometimes florists and designers get a little sensitive about you selling or people selling to both them and their customers. Do both of you how do you guys approach the retail aspect of it?
I mean, for us, the majority of our wholesale buyers are the larger event florists. It's not necessarily the brick and mortar where we're competing in retail spaces, although they are our customers too, and they're just happy to have local product and say, "Hey, I got this, from this farm. He's only 15 miles away." Um, but otherwise, retail for us is you can walk in or you can pre-order and we deliver. They can pre-order for pickup and come in and see the shop. And we're centrally located in Richmond now, and so we get foot traffic at lunchtime, which has been really great. And we're a weekend destination. Like we're right up there with the farmers market for these people planning their weekend circuits. And just by offering more retail oriented things like bouquets and value add products, because people want to come in and they want to support, but maybe they can't buy a bunch of dahlias because of the price point. But they can buy a candle or they can buy a box of tea from one of our farms, and still feel really good about supporting local.
Love that.
Awesome.
Do you guys do
Yeah.
retail also, Jill?
Yeah, so we just started retail this year. We approach it a little bit differently. That was something that we put up for a vote again last year to our full membership. How do you feel about retail? And, from the farmer's perspective, it's one more sales channel opportunity. And I think a lot of our buyer members understood that and supported the choice for that reason. And the way that we still favor our wholesale members, because as a member with us, you do pay a membership fee. As a new member, it's $40 for returning members. It's $25 for buyers. So we try to keep it. We don't want any cost prohibitive membership fees. So we do that as just sort of like a buy-in. Again, it helps us with those upfront costs at the beginning of the season, overhead, yada yada. But in general, we like to still prioritize our wholesale members. So for that, they're the only ones who get pre-ordering access. They're the only ones allowed for Wednesday market. So they sort of get first pick of the best of. And we're only open for retail on Thursdays and Fridays, and we don't do any pre-ordering. And they also have a 30% markup on the retail price, which we're transparent with everyone about. That's the difference. Um, so that's our sort of way of keeping it fair for everyone. It's sort of like, as a retail buyer, it's sort of your prerogative if you want to pay more for it and come and support local. For us, we found that it's very much about the experience of coming into a flower market and seeing the variety and selection. That's been really fun, and we also host workshops as a way to sort of bring in new people and kind of get a new audience. And we're now open like one Saturday a month, um, to
Hmm.
to be able to accommodate more retail customers, because our hours are 8 to 10 a.m. on Thursdays and Fridays, so it's kind of a small window for most folks to be able to make it in on time. So one Saturday a month has done really well for us.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
River City, we do. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you the same thing. Like, do you change the pricing, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so we also take care of our wholesale in that we have priority hours for pre-ordering and in-person shopping, and so they're never really at the market at the same time that a retail person is. I mean, they're more than welcome to, but retail is not allowed into their hours.
Yeah.
And our retail markup is 50%. So yeah, the retail is definitely different. We also have a member
High
buy-in
five.
for Um, and we do have membership fees too, so our wholesale buyers have to buy in order to get wholesale pricing. And the first for new ones it's 40, for returning it's 20. And we also do DIY passes. So a retail person can buy a DIY pass for $40. They get access to wholesale for 1 week. And so they get treated as a wholesale person for just that week. And it's geared towards, we have a lot of DIY event brides, or friends that are doing it. And that's something we've seen like an uptick in the city too, is as weddings get bigger and bigger and bigger, the DIY is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we definitely want to accommodate them and help them through that process too, and make the flowers accessible for their special day.
Right.
Well, and I love how you're not just turning away business. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes people might say, sorry, we don't do that. But you're finding a compromise that can work within the parameters. And, the members agree to it, and, everyone's happy with it. And it's, we, we have a saying where I work, and that's, a sale is a sale. And, when at the end of the year, those things add up. And so it's really great that you can find ways to accommodate the business that way. Um,
Yeah.
I I've, I'm curious. I have two more kind of biggish topics I really want to talk about briefly. Um, Big and briefly, that doesn't usually go well together. One is, how do you evaluate farmers that want to say, hey, they're knocking at your door, and can we come and play with you guys? How do you deal with that?
So for us, this is the first year we've invited new farms in as a cooperative, and we call them trial growers. And they have to fill out an application, and that asks any general thing from like, why do you want to be part of River City? We want to hear essentially like a paraphrased cover letter, like why you want to be here and what you know about us, but also what's your experience? What is your experience with wholesale? What is your experience with retail? Like what kind of crops do you grow and when is your growing season? Because again, through analytics and through knowing our farms, we know what we have surplus of, and we don't really want to bring in a farm that has that same stuff because it's not gonna go well for them. And so we've brought in a lot of specialty farms as trial growers this year. We've got a hydrangea grower, and that's all he has is paniculata hydrangeas. And we've got a peony and a woody person too. And so they're able to hit different seasons that those of us who grow just mostly specialty annuals can't hit. And so that's just increasing our variety for our buyers, but it's also advantageous for them too. They now get the same benefits as us, but yeah, we really vet them, and it's important, and what we do is important, and we try to make sure it's going to be a relationship that's actually going to work, and they're going to be transparent, and again with the communication, it's totally key.
Yeah, it's really hard to let somebody kind of into the inner sanctum, because it's so easy to upset the apple cart. People really have to jive. There's a term from the 70s, and but it's really true, and it's a it's a tested situation. So I think that's smart. How long do you usually test them, or however you phrased it?
So it's a full year commitment, and then they'll come in front of the board at the end of the year, and we'll kind of do a review and ask them, what they felt went well, what they felt didn't go so well, and but also we receive their feedback too because they're fresh eyes, and so they might have something or see a hole that we have always missed, and so that's important for us to hear them out also, and we also require 20 hours of work for the year from them. So we require that they come and participate at market because they need to know what RN looks like, and so that they're not in a bubble on their own.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jill, how do you guys approach this?
Yeah, so we also have an application system where growers apply, and we pretty much open that once a year. As you can imagine, managing 28 growers is a lot. So I feel like this year we have truly hit our capacity. But we also open it up to our existing grower membership and say, how is this working for you? How have your priorities changed? Maybe a life event happened and they're not growing anymore. They're growing double the amount. So we start by really taking a look at our current growers and making sure that everybody's in it for the next year, and if not, what's going to change and where do we have holes now. So that's sort of what we're doing on the back end with our planning process. And then actually right around this time of year, I was doing this morning, we're looking at new grower applicants, which we keep the applications open year round. They can submit it at any time. And we review them at the end of the season, and we pretty much just do a comprehensive interview process. And after taking a look at their application, we do have a few minimum requirements, things like at least 2 years of professional cut flower growing experience, which we've found that even longer than that is usually more helpful. And like Justine mentioned, experience selling wholesale. It's very different than, selling at a front yard cart or at a farmer's market. And as I mentioned earlier, there's so much accountability that goes into being a grower with us, for the work on the grower's end. We do a lot of work on our end, but they still have to hold up their end of the bargain. So it's sort of just like making sure that they actually have the time to commit to what we're asking of them. And usually by the end of checking off all of those boxes, we have a really good sense of if this is a good fit or not. Yeah, and like I said, we revisit each grower at the end of the season to say what worked, what didn't, and go from there.
Well, you perfectly led into my other topic, Jill, and actually you too, Justine, when talking about this wholesale experience, like them actually selling. How do you approach the topic of standardization. Whether
Mm-hmm.
it's sunflower length or dahlia cut stage or tulips on bulbs and not on bulbs. I mean, there's almost every flower has its own issue or standards, and I'm wondering how you guys approach that, especially in general, but and specifically with newer growers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for us, that's another committee like long process to set standards, and it's something that is always constantly changing, and we're taking pictures on the floor and we're letting growers know like what other
Justine, you
product looks like if they're not
froze.
able to come to
I
market.
don't know if you're really froze or
But for
not
new
froze.
growers, like because we are wholesale oriented and wholesale is important to us, it's really having them understand what a uniform bunch actually looks like, and how to clean the stems and how far those stems should be clean when they're put into water. And the stage of harvest is really important too. And so it's a
Sure.
lot of education and hand holding, but that saves us work in the long run, and it keeps our product and our buyers coming back because they know it's going to be the same every single week and we're not going to let them down.
Right. I mean, that's why it's such an important topic. Because I mean, that's one of the things I've done is working with growers for the same reason. Jill, how do you guys approach that? The same
Yeah,
or?
so yeah, pretty similarly. We do have sort of a manual of a few key crops that can be a little bit tricky to like peonies, like harvesting at that perfect marshmallow stage, and like you mentioned, tulips, and sort of like when and what stage you're cutting. But that's also part of, that interview process that we mentioned. It's sort of if they haven't had those 2 years of experience at the very least, they might not know that distinction. So that's why that's one of such an important part of who we're letting in and not. It's just nothing beats experience in this case. It's just growers who kind of understand the difference. But even with that, even with people who've been doing it a long time, the change for us and not having growers at market anymore is it's kind of hard to compare apples to apples here, like looking at this amaranth bunch versus this one.
Right.
So sometimes if I see a major distinction on the floor, I'll take a photo, I'll document it, and notify the grower. Here's what we're offering as the standard. Here's what your bunch looks like. That's fine. Just know that this is what we're going for. And because it's really hard for growers to see that standardization when they're not there. But the beauty of it is too that sometimes we do have a buyer who's like, I need really chunky amaranth, and some that are like, I'm looking for the little bitty ones. So while we do our best to standardize product, there is some beauty in the variety as well, because it ends up benefiting different people. And again, we have those three price points to be able to accommodate those different needs. And sometimes, it kind of works out in the end, is the short version of what I'm saying.
Sure. No, and just being open and communication. I mean, that's always
Yeah,
the big deal. Um,
definitely.
I am curious. How long have you? I'm going to go back to Rooted for just a second. How long have you guys been using Rooted?
So we started partway through 2020.
Okay.
We made the switch in, I think, July, which was a wild time to do that, but we did it, and we don't regret it by any. Like it's been the best thing ever.
Yeah, that was brave. That's awesome. Doing it in July, that could be a challenge. Um,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Jill, how about you guys? How long have you been using it?
We've been using it as long as I've been a part of the collective, so for the past 3 years. And yeah, it's grown each year, and new features and added added details every year, which they've been great about our feedback too. Just when we see a need or a buyer sees a need, I feel like they've been really adaptable and responsive to things we notice we need. It's so tailored to the industry. It's crazy.
Hmm, that's great. And because I guess I was wondering, do you feel like as a collective, if I'm an individual farmer using that platform, I feel like it's like everything is there. Is there any additional sort of onboarding? And my fingers are in quotation marks. Onboarding to the using the platform for cooperative? Is it something that's a little more complex? Do you need a little more hand holding, just kind of getting to that full scale capability, or is it something that was intuitive for you?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, the Rooted team will sit down with us and do training sessions, and they do have office hours every Tuesday that any grower or collective can jump in and get some help with like quick technical stuff. But in terms of onboarding for admins of a collective, it's not too difficult. There's just a couple other buttons or a way to see like visibility of your entire collective that like an individual farm would not have. But um, no, I mean they're great about customer service and onboarding and making sure that you have all the tools that you need. And if not, they're open for questions like pretty much 24/7. Um,
Yeah.
and then it makes sense. It's like
Yeah.
you're off the races and you're good to go.
Yeah. We approach it at the beginning of the season. We typically do a training session with all of our growers just to go over our grower handbook, any changes that have been made throughout the year. And then Amelia will usually sit in on our training session, and we'll have a whole segment dedicated to Rooted, and she'll explain new features. And that's again kind of the beauty of having like our group that's been there, is they sort of know the drill and know what they can do, but oftentimes there's an added feature or something new that we want to teach them or something that we want to remind them of. So Rooted does that initial training with us, and then on the buyer end, we actually send out a welcome email that has a video that we've included some training and details on how to use Rooted, how to sign up for an account. So that video kind of like guides them through the step by step. And yeah, they're extremely hands-on. When I first came on, they sort of showed me the whole drill and will contact me when there's updates or anything new they want to point out to me, and kind of have us trial it and make sure that it functions well, and then they'll launch. And like Justine said, then it's just easy peasy.
Sure. Well, I want to, for all of our listeners that are still here just soaking all this up, I want to just inform you guys of a few things. If you are interested in Amelia's course, it's on thegardenersworkshop.com. It's one of the evergreen courses that you can get at any time. We'll put a link in our show notes down below, so that way it's just easy for you to go find it, because it's one of those things that it's not a large amount of money, and you get a lot of information to really evaluate and digest on your own if this is the direction you want to go, and if you want to tackle this, if you will. And then I will also want to share, if you haven't heard, we've had Amelia on twice on our podcast, but we've also this past spring recorded 2 YouTube channels with not YouTube channels. We've also recorded 2 YouTube videos that show we're walking through the buyer side of Rooted and the farmer side of Rooted. So you can go to the Flower Podcast YouTube channel and see those. And you can kind of get a feel for really what's going on with these platforms and how they might have features that you can utilize, and it might make your life a whole lot easier. I know at the end of the season, everyone's tired, and they're waiting for Frostmas or what, freeze vacation or whatever they call it. And I get it, and it's so true. But this for a lot of people is a great time to start thinking about this and start building up your platform for next season, because some of our seasons start earlier if we're into tulips, ranunculus, and anemones than just summer annuals. So I just wanted to suggest that you guys do that, and we'll put links to our YouTube channel and stuff also in the show notes down below, because it's just a really easy non-confrontational way to just kind of digest that information and check it out and see what you think. And I know that it's definitely worth the while. Just as parting thoughts, both of you. I just wondering, any last thoughts you'd like to share? Anything, any last advice you'd like to share? Anything that is on your heart that, you guys are doing such a fantastic job. I know that people will respect and honor what you have to say.
Yeah, thanks so much, Scott, for having us. This has been wonderful. I feel like we covered so much ground that off the top of my head, can't think of anything else to add that we haven't covered. But, this has been great, and I hope, people find it helpful and encouraging for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I echo that. Thank you so much, and thank you to the people who care enough to, put time into this work and to understand the importance of local flowers. That's why this is all possible, is because of that shared mindset. So I appreciate that a lot. Um, and I think, yeah, just if you're thinking about starting a collective, one thing that I always go back to is asking yourself what kind of experience you want to create for yourself, for your membership, for your farmers, for everyone that you're engaged with in your community. Because what's so cool and what's so powerful about collectives is that you're able to directly impact the people around you, and you're able to
Yeah.
curate this experience. And sometimes when you go to buy flowers, it's not fun or it's stressful. And, as a collective, there's something that you can do to kind of change that feeling. And I think there's some beauty that goes into that when it leaves the door and goes to make someone's, event or day special. So, yeah, I think that's valuable to take with you and think about. But yeah, in
Well,
general, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And I think that's a great note. And I want to just tie that back into what I think, Justine, I think you mentioned this earlier about relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
that is one thing, we're all dealing in a perishable product, whether we're growing it or selling it or designing with it. And it can be stressful. It's not all, roses and everything, well, it is, but you know what I'm saying? It's not all, sometimes people sort of romanticize the process,
Definitely.
and a lot of times it's those experiences and um, those relationships that really help us all get through the highs and the lows. And
Definitely.
I really, really appreciate you guys joining me today. So thank you for being on the Flower Podcast.
Thanks for having
Thanks so
us.
much.